Hey everyone, good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of ClearTalk. In this episode, we'll be talking about the financial skills that every integrator needs to be successful and plan for success. I'm here with two key guests. We've got Sam Neuenschwander, who is the Director of Delivery at Parallel Technologies, Inc., where he oversees all aspects of service and project delivery to ensure exceptional customer experiences. With over a decade of experience leading technical teams, Sam specializes in creating efficient process that drives operational excellence and client satisfaction. Welcome, Sam. Glad to have you here. We also have Mark Fenner, who is the CEO and founder of Rise Performance Group, a leadership development and executive coaching firm dedicated to helping mid-market companies scale with confidence and clarity. With over 25 years of experience, sales leadership across software, technology, and service industries, Mark is a certified scaling up coach and John Maxwell certified leadership coach, as well as a member advisory council member, a MAC member with the National Systems Contractor Association. Welcome, Mark.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's get into it. So Sam, at Parallel Technologies, it's fast-paced technical environment. How do you connect the frontline decision making with the financial outcomes?
Yeah, so we've slowly over time kind of taught everybody what their roles are in the finances. We have our project managers, watching for, what their costs are in their projects. Our purchasing team is looking for where we're spending our money, how we're getting our best, from our procurement avenues. And then we've got our sales team that they're driving the margins, which, the sales lives and dies on margins. So that's pretty easy one there. So we've it kind of depends on whose role and what aspects they have. We have, they're focused on those things that are individual contributors back into the financials.
Got it. So everyone's impacting it. Now, Mark, as someone who's coaching leaders, what's the biggest mind shift that you see when a manager begins to think more like a business owner in that regard?
Yeah, it's a great question, Tim. And in a lot of teams, even sometimes at the executive level, but certainly when you get below the executive level, they think financial performance is really owned by the finance department. And so the first mind shift is that all finance does is report. And what they're reporting on is the outcome of your activities. So in the beginning, it's important to get clear on what are the financial goals of the company. And something that I feel is very important is to get off of just revenue and focus on profitability and cash generation. I like to say revenue's vanity, profit sanity, but cash is king. And so educating them on how the decisions they're making are impacting profitability in cash. And then, as Sam said, I mean, his company is really the benchmark in how to operationally implement this, but design KPIs that then cascade down through the organization so that every member on the team understands how their actions and the decisions they're making are driving the financial performance of the organization. That's when magic starts to happen. And that's when everybody can really get aligned behind a goal, right, that we all contribute in. And it's the key to really driving down peer accountability, where each department or each peer is working with each other to get a result rather than depending on management holding them accountable to different KPIs or different measures.
So you're saying that everybody's got an impact. Everyone's hitting that at the end of the day, we're hitting that top line and the bottom line. But it's not just about revenue, right? Like everybody's got an impact here. Now, Sam, what are some of the key KPIs that you're leveraging as you're going out and everybody has a number? What are the most important ones that you're tracking when it comes to cash is king?
Yeah, so operationally, we're looking at, where are we at in costs of project pickups, project slips. We're reporting on those regularly. We've got different reports to see different change orders that are coming through. We're regularly reviewing our billing. So we're looking at our over under billing ratios, which projects are behind, which ones, why are they behind, which ones, where everything's at. And then from our procurement team looks at, who we're purchasing from, where our spend is at, and, what leverages do we have there, and things like that will, on the procurement side of things, that really get you, or understanding your shipping, because that can make an impact across projects and as a company as a whole if you don't know where your shipping avenues are or your discounts are. So it's kind of, we track all of it.
Mark, are there any key ones that you would expect to hear in addition to what Sam has just said?
Yeah, I mean Sam is a best practice on this, but I think what I would caution people is I work with organizations. I tend to work with two types. I work with some when we get started, they're measuring everything. And the challenge in those organizations is not only are they measuring everything, but they're reporting everything. And it kind of becomes death by a thousand cuts, right? There's always a KPI that's on track and always one that's off track. And I like to say sometimes in those organizations, the teams, they're drowning in information, but they're starving for the wisdom. And then I deal with others that don't have any KPIs at all. So I think a good best practice at the executive team level, and your software helps them do this, right? Helps them get good, accurate measurement, is boil it down to those things that are most important. So you think sales, their job is to bring in the bookings. So sales ought to have a bookings number, and it ought to be either revenue or gross profit dollar generated. I happen to like it to be measured by gross profit dollars. So what are the gross profit dollars that we're booking each week and then each month? Most clients will set a monthly target. Another great measure is the backlog. And as your organization grows, in the beginning, it's just great to have a backlog, right? We want to have it at a certain target. Most of my clients in similar businesses look at the backlog as being around 6 months worth of future revenues or future gross profits. As they grow and you start bringing in bigger and bigger projects that sometimes span years, it makes sense to take your backlog and break it into what we call a 12-month backlog. So what are we going to bill in the next 12 months, or what do we anticipate delivering in the next 12 months? When you get into operations, really operations is the key to earning the revenue. So they ought to own a revenue number. They ought to have a gross profit dollar. They ought to have profitability. As Sam said, we should know, are they on track or off track with the schedule? Internal change orders is a big one that clients look to track. And a negative internal change order means we missed something, so we had to eat the cost of it. A positive internal change order is we came in more efficiently, and that's positive back to profitability of the organization. And if you can get those two departments, there's a lot of nuance, where's estimating or engineering, all that fit in there. But if you can get those two departments working together and humming and have good management or good KPIs at the executive team, then you're really a long way towards building a great organization.
Yeah.
And
And
I'll add on uh, to what Mark had said is like this: if you start at the top and work your way down on what those numbers are, you could take and even take your revenue number down to how much per sales guy, and then you take that revenue number and you attach it to a project manager, or you attach it to service, and you work on what each person is individually contributing back in, and then they can see where their efforts are being applied to. You want to be a little careful on how you interpret those, on what you're doing and what message you're trying to send with those, because we always try to look at it and drive towards that top level goal. Is the top level goal is the target, but we understand where our individual contributors are, and careful to keep in mind that we want to work as a team to get to the top level and not just as individuals.
That's right. Great point. Great point.
so always have that top goal in mind, but also be tracking at the individual contributor level as well. And it's not just revenue, it's backlog, it's all the pieces in between. I guess one of the things we all have run into pitfalls, right? So what are some of the common mistakes that you see when it comes to looking at the level of detail I think I heard you say it earlier, Mark, that sometimes we can look at everything and it's important to get clarity. So I'm hearing that as one piece. How would you go about getting that clarity? Or Sam, maybe you want to take this. How have you done it at Parallel Technologies to go, these are the most important things to our business?
Yeah, so they kind of develop over time. You start out, when you're, really young and trying to figure out what you're doing, you look at different ones and you hone those in. And once you get really good at those, you can kind of expand it onto something different and start honing in that. And you keep just working towards different things. So that's really where we aim to do is just keep working. But it's a little bit of being careful on chasing too much. And I think the pitfall that you could run into is you know looking at the data at a high level and making assumptions without understanding, having somebody who has some level of understanding of the underlying data, because you can quickly make a decision and start doing the pendulum swing with a company by not understanding what the trends are, what the underlying data is actually really telling you, because you might have a slip that's a single project, and it happens. You might have a big pickup that's it's got its own things around it, but there's always there's nuances to everything, and you got to be really careful and guard yourself against making assumptions on data without some background. And sometimes it means you got to pull a group together and have a conversation. You can't just rely on the data.
Yeah. Do you have an example or a story you could share to really highlight that?
I mean, we'll see it on like we'll do um lessons learned, right? Those are probably the big ones where we'll see something and be like, all right, hold on, something's off here. Let's schedule lessons learned on this. We've done mid-project lessons learned. If we see something that is starting to veer off track and we're like, okay, why are we so far off track so early in our process? We'll pull together a team and go, okay, the data's showing this. Why are we, this says where we're headed, and it'd be like, okay, we are really headed there. How do we mitigate that? Or, well, we're really not headed there. That just is a temporary thing, and we're going to see it fix itself. So
Yeah.
there'll be a course correction. I mean, that's really, we try to encourage our project managers and the team to be honest early. And if the earlier they're honest with us about change orders or problems that are coming in a project, good or bad, the better it is on the financials. Then you don't have the ups and downs on the financials. It levels itself out much better, and you don't get the surprises at the end of a project where you don't have time to do any risk mitigation. You don't have time to have conversations about should have been a contract change order somewhere in here. All those conversations, if it can happen early, they can't happen late.
Yeah. So
So,
really, you've created an environment, it's trusting, you're getting it out there, the problems are well known early. And then, Mark, I know you do a lot of work around setting an excellent performing culture. How do you develop that kind of level of trust from a leadership perspective?
well, it takes time. That's for sure. But it starts, one of the biggest risks to developing trust is siloization. And that's when people start competing what's good for their department instead of doing what's best for the company overall. And the first step in that is to establish a goal that everybody owns. So what defines winning as for the organization, for the team that we're leading? And typically that's measured every month or every quarter. Did we hit our numbers? And a place to start is even just a revenue goal. What's the revenue goal? I think a better measure would be a gross profit dollar goal. Now we've got some kind of profitability. We're looping in, the performance of a group like Sam's and the performance of the sales team. They got to work together to make that happen. To take it another step further, I like EBITDA companies that get really centered around a bottom line profitability goal. I think is even better. And I think my favorite is operating cash flow. But some organizations, you got to crawl, you got to walk, and then you got to run. and you've got to overcome some inhibitions from leadership to be willing to share the financials. But what I've seen and what, I know Sam is accomplished at Parallel, and I know the best users of your enterprise software, what they find is when we're able to cascade those numbers down, as Sam talked about, where everybody in the company has a number. They know if I wake up every day and I deliver on this, I'm going to give the team the highest probability of winning. And so what happens when you do that, you create a culture that's about winning, right? And I've never met a group of people who don't like winning. I mean, I'm down in Dallas, Texas. The Rangers went to the World Series a couple years ago. That stadium was sold out all through the end of that run, and of course, every playoff game. And there was a big parade when they're done. Rangers weren't winning so much last year. Guess what? Not quite so many people in the stadiums. Same thing with your company. You get on that habit of winning, and you just a player talent just starts collapsing on your organization. The other thing it does is it drives that team accountability. And the best accountability is not boss to employee, but it's when team members are working together to solve problems, remind each other of the goals and the commitments we made, and up-leveling each other's standards to deliver a result. And when you get this right, where you've got real-time data, the data is accurate, we're not debating about the data, and we're able to see on a daily or weekly basis how our performance is driving the plan, that's when everybody becomes part of winning. It starts spinning a big flywheel, and that's when you see the performance of your organization really start to escalate, and you've got that culture of winning, that culture of performance.
Yeah. So again, I'm hearing it loud and clear. It's not just revenue, it's about all the individual metrics that tie in together and are going to drive the accountability throughout the organization. And quite frankly, I'm with you, Mark. I've always felt when I'm doing it, when there's clear, metrics of what I'm supposed to be after, it makes it super easy to go after it. And it really helps to know how we're tying into the big picture. So completely agree with you there.
Well, and Tim, maybe some of the listeners here can relate with this, but oftentimes I'll come into an organization and an owner or an entrepreneur or the majority shareholder, they're frustrated because they're not making the money that they feel like an organization of their quality should be generating, right? I mean, if you're good, the measure of that is you should be financially healthy. It's like an athlete. How many athletes do you meet that are 20 pounds overweight and slothy? You don't meet them, because if they're good, they keep themselves in shape. And so financial and operational performance is a measure of that. But oftentimes I'll say, well, how do you define winning in your company? And there's not a clear KPI that everybody can rally around that defines winning. So it's worth spending some time and answering that question. That's when you have the highest probability of aligning your team and really starting to generate results.
What is one lesson from parallel technologies that you think every system integrator should hear as you've gone through this exercise?
I think Mark said something earlier. It takes time. It takes time. I mean, just learning the financial literacy of how things work and getting people to understand the financial background, because most, your project managers, your customer service reps, they're not finance people. But to get them to understand it, it takes time to get the habits in place, to do the discipline, all that stuff. It takes time. And you got to have the willingness to allow the time to happen. If you want to get to the end and you want it to be tomorrow, it's not going to go well. Now, if you have a realistic timeline and chunk it up, right? You have different things, what your goal is chunk it up into measurables that you can reach. What do you want to accomplish in 30, 60, 90? And if you chunk those up, you can get somewhere and have goals for your teams on what you want to do. And when you get those goals, what's the next one we're going to try to do? And check back in and make sure the ones that you were doing that you just got good at, are you still good at those, or did those fall off because you're now focused somewhere else? So it's a little bit of, you keep moving forward, but while paying attention to where you've been and come along. And before too long, you can have conversations that goes, hey, do you remember when we used to do this and we didn't have this information and we didn't know this stuff? Those get to be fun conversations to look back and see, where you've been and how you've gotten there. And it takes time. That would be my give it time, be committed, and the commitment has to be at the executive level. That's the
Mhm.
commitment's got to be there, and then push down realistically.
So give it time, get the commitment at the top level, and not just, set the goals, but revisit them, make sure you're hitting them when you are taking a step back, you're recognizing it and then moving forward. So really, it's that continuous improvement that I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Continuous improvement and time.
And Mark, from your side, what's a misconception about leadership and financial thinking that you'd like to put to rest today?
That it can happen quickly. To Sam's point, I mean, just look at it in sports, right? You get a new owner, you get a new general manager, you get a new coach, and they hire new people and they want to get their systems installed, and they'll talk about this being a rebuilding year. Well, in business, it may take more than a year. It just takes time and it takes constant focus. I like the term constant and never ending improvement. You're constantly looking at how to make things better. And, there's some unintended consequences when building a business. As I said, if we put a big focus on productivity, then culture may slip a little bit. It's kind of like squeezing a balloon, right? You squeeze one little area and the other area is popping up, and so you've got to be paying attention to the whole business. So think about, there's probably no relationship more important than your employee relationships. Are our employees engaged? Do they feel supported? Our customers, are we taking care of our customers? Do our customers feel loved? Do they feel the difference that our brand promise brings to the table? It's financial performance. Are we performing well financially? Are we hitting the targets we set? Operationally, are we getting stuff out first time? Is drama reduced? Do we look relaxed when people come to our office, or are people running around and fighting fires every day? And then think about sales. Are we generating new sales? And are we generating profitable sales? Are those margins going up? So the conception that you can come in here and just kind of wave a wand or implement a new system and it's going to fix all that are false. It takes dedication. It takes the focus on all five of those areas, and it takes having a consistent scoreboard. Let your team know how we're defining success. And by the way, your team in a lot of cases has the answers. If you'll listen, if you can get them clear on what's most important, they'll help you solve a lot of problems. So maybe 1A on the misconception list is, as the leader, I got to have all the options or all the answers. Let your team help you solve problems. Become a great listener. Create clarity, right? If you don't have clarity, then you're going to hear stuff coming from all over the place. But if we're clear on how we're defining winning, you'll be amazed the problems and the number of problems your team can help you solve. Then you create an empowered organization that starts to work like a flywheel that generates more and more momentum. And then before you know it, you're really hockey sticking your
Yeah.
growth, not only in revenues, but in profits and cash generation.
Yeah. So Mark and Sam, I heard both of you guys say that time. We need to give ourselves some grace and time, and we need to not set the expectation that's going to be done quick. And that feels really good. One of the questions that maybe I would have as a system integrator is, okay, that sounds good, but where do I start? What's a tangible action item that I could take? Is there something that we can leave our viewers that would be a good first step if they had nothing, where they could go and start making some progress today?
Well, I'd say probably the first one is set out what do you want at the end? That's the first, define the end.
So that would be
And
step.
then yeah, that's the first thing. Where do you want to even get to? If you don't know where you want to get to, you don't know what road to take or what turns, right? So you got to define where you want to get to. What do you want to do as a company? Do you have a margin goal that you want to hit? Do you have an EBITDA number that you're trying to improve, right? What are the goals? Do you have, maybe it's the type of clients you get. What are the goals that you're trying to do? Um, I think that's the first step is define what you want the end to look like. Because once you know what the end is, then the next thing to do is start chunking it. right? What are the things that we can do and list those out to accomplish this goal? And then then you could probably put timelines to it a little bit and
Mhm.
start working towards those timelines, because you might, if you want to get to here, it might be a 1 year or 2 year project to get there. And it'll be little pieces by little pieces where that you see the EBITDA number just go up a little bit and then a little bit. And then now you're tracking to something better. So I think the first thing is define what you want to look like.
Yeah. So set the vision. Step
Yep.
one, set the vision. Where do we want to be? Step two, chunk it up into bite sizes, where step three, you can really start to set timeline specific people to own that
Yep.
specific. Awesome. I think that's very helpful. Mark, is there anything that you would add to that you've seen be
No, I just emphasize what Stam said, clarity is power. And when people know where you're going and why it's important to get there, then you're tapping into their resourcefulness, their God-given talents and abilities. And again, rather than you being one or a leadership team of 5 or 6 making all the decisions, now you cascade that problem solving, that decision making, that accountability down into the organization. And that's when you really build a great team that can accomplish great things.
absolutely completely agree with you both. Sam, Mark, thank you so much for being on our Clear Talk today. Are there any closing remarks that either of you would like to end with
I'd
here?
just like to say, Tim, thank you very much. What a treat to be here with Sam. So thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks. Same. Great to be here, be part of this. And if I were to say anything, for your listeners, today's a good day to start.
Well, that concludes our Clear Talk. Sam, Mark, thank you so much for being on our podcast today, and I'm glad to share with us with your viewers. With that, is there anything that you would like to leave off and conclude our session today?
I'd say the one thing I'd leave for your listeners is, as parallel to technologies, we're very much a regional based in Minnesota in the Twin Cities area. So we're always looking for good partners that are aiming to do the same quality of work that we are.
Hey, Mark, how about yourself? Anything you'd like to leave off with?
Well, thanks for the question. I would just say if anybody out there has ever thought about bringing in a coach or hasn't thought about bringing in a coach, I'd love to have a discussion and see if it might be right for you and your business.
Wonderful. I'm sure that lots of people will be in touch and wishing you both the best of success. And thank you again for being on our Clear Talk today.
Thanks, Tim.